They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I like mine with hot sauce.
You know what they say about Halloween parties in suburbia? They're like marriage counseling sessions with better costumes and worse decisions. Standing in Richard's overcrowded living room, nursing my third beer and watching my wife Alicia prance around in a skin-tight Catwoman suit that left absolutely nothing to the imagination, I was starting to think someone should have warned me about the second part. "Greg, you look like you're plotting someone's homicide," Richard said, appearing at my elbow with his trademark smirk. He was dressed as a pirate, complete with a plastic sword that he'd been using to gesture dramatically all night. "Please tell me it's not mine." "Nah, you're safe," I replied, taking another swig of beer. "I save my homicidal thoughts for people who actually matter." Richard laughed, but his eyes followed my gaze across the room to where Alicia was giggling with Dominic Martinez, her co-worker from the airline. Dominic had shown up as Tarzan, which basically meant he'd found an excuse to oil up his gym-sculpted chest and wear a loincloth that probably violated several public decency laws. The guy was 42 years old, for Christ's sake. There should be an age limit on that kind of costume. "You know," Richard said carefully. "If you're worried about—" "I'm not worried about anything," I cut him off. "Just enjoying the show." But I was lying, and we both knew it. Alicia had been acting strange for weeks, staying late at work, taking phone calls in the bathroom, buying new lingerie that I never got to see her wear. Tonight, she'd barely acknowledged my existence, too busy batting her eyelashes at every guy in the room like she was auditioning for a role in some cheesy romance movie. "Where's Susie?" I asked, looking around for Dominic's wife. She was supposed to be Alicia's best friend, though watching my wife flirt with her husband, you'd never know it. "Kitchen, I think. Helping Nikki with the drinks?" Richard paused, studying my face. "You sure you're okay, man? You look like you're about to punch something." "Just thinking," I said, "about costumes and masks and how sometimes people wear them even when it's not Halloween." Before Richard could respond, a burst of laughter from across the room drew our attention. Alicia had her hand on Dominic's bicep, her head thrown back in exaggerated delight at whatever incredibly witty thing he'd just said. The sight made my stomach churn, but not as much as what I'd discovered earlier that evening. See, I'd been looking for aspirin in Alicia's purse. She always carried the good stuff. When I'd found something that definitely wasn't medication. Well, technically it was, but not the kind you take for headaches. A small bottle of personal lubricant and a packet of little blue pills that definitely weren't prescribed to my wife. Now, I'm not a genius, but I can put two and two together, especially when the math involves my wife carrying around Zex supplies to a Halloween party where her muscle-bound co-worker was practically undressed and his wife was conveniently distracted. "I'll be right back," I told Richard, setting down my beer. "Need to check on something." I made my way through the crowd, dodging a drunk zombie and a vampire who was way too enthusiastic about his fake fangs. The kitchen was quieter, just Nikki and Susie chatting over a bottle of wine while they arranged snacks on plastic Halloween plates. "Greg," Susie called out, her cheeks flushed from booze. "There you are. We were just talking about you." "All good things, I hope," I said, forcing a smile. "Nikki was telling me about that restaurant customer who tried to return a half-eaten burger last week," Susie giggled. "The one who claimed it tasted like sadness." "Yeah, well, some people have very sophisticated palates," I replied. But my mind was elsewhere. I was thinking about the little care package I'd prepared for my wife after discovering her party supplies. Amazing what you can accomplish with a trip to the spice shop and a basic understanding of chemistry. "You should write a book," Nikki said, refilling her wine glass. "All the crazy stories from managing those restaurants. Better than reality TV." "Maybe I will," I said. Chapter 1. How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Revenge. They both laughed, but I wasn't really joking. See, while Alicia had been getting ready for the party, primping and preening in that ridiculous costume, I'd taken the liberty of making a few modifications to her evening plans. The lube had been replaced with a special mixture involving ghost pepper extract. Just a few drops. Nothing dangerous, but definitely memorable. And those little blue pills? Well, let's just say they'd been swapped out for something that would produce a very different kind of physical reaction. "Earth to Greg," Susie was saying, waving her hand in front of my face. "You're doing that thing again." "What thing?" "That scary smile thing. Like you know something the rest of us don't." "Maybe I do," I said, grabbing a handful of candy from the bowl on the counter. "Maybe I know exactly what kind of party this is going to turn out to be." As if on cue, a commotion erupted from the living room. Raised voices, someone shouting about spilled drinks, and underneath it all, Alicia's distinctive laugh, the fake one she used when she was nervous or trying too hard to impress someone. "Sounds like the party's getting interesting," Nikki observed, craning her neck to see what was happening. "Oh, it's about to get a lot more interesting," I muttered. But they didn't hear me. They were already heading back toward the living room, drawn by the promise of drama like moths to a flame. I followed them, pushing through the crowd until I could see what was going on. John, my old friend from college, was in the middle of what appeared to be a heated debate with some guy dressed as Superman. They were both drunk and arguing about something stupid, probably sports or politics or which superhero could beat up which other superhero. Hulk would destroy Superman. John was shouting, his Captain America costume wrinkled and stained with beer. "You can't argue with pure rage, man." "Superman has heat vision," the other guy shot back. "He'd fry the Hulk before he even got close." "You're both idiots," I called out, unable to resist. "Batman would outsmart them both and be home in time for dinner." The crowd laughed, and for a moment I felt like my old self, the guy who could diffuse tension with a joke, who people actually liked being around. But then I caught sight of Alicia and Dominic again, and the moment soured. They were standing by the punch bowl, heads close together, whispering about something. As I watched, Dominic's hand brushed against Alicia's lower back, and she didn't pull away. In fact, she leaned into the touch, her eyes sparkling with the kind of excitement I hadn't seen in months. "That's it," I said under my breath. "What's it?" Richard asked, appearing beside me again. "Nothing," I lied. "Just thinking about how much I love Halloween. All those masks and costumes, people pretending to be something they're not. It's like a metaphor for life, don't you think?" Richard gave me a strange look. "Greg, are you feeling okay? You're talking like a villain in a bad movie." "Am I?" I grinned, and I could tell from his expression that Susie was right about my smile being scary. "Well, maybe that's because the movie's just getting started." Before he could respond, I was moving through the crowd again, this time with purpose. I had a front row seat to my wife's little performance, and I was starting to think it was time for an intermission. As I got closer, I could hear fragments of their conversation. "Tomorrow night," Alicia was saying, "the kids are at my mother's until Sunday." "Perfect," Dominic replied, his voice low and rough. "I've been thinking about this all week." "Me too," she whispered, and the breathless quality of her voice made my hands clench into fists. I was close enough now to smell her perfume, the expensive stuff she only wore for special occasions. Apparently, planning to cheat on your husband qualified as special. "Excuse me," I said loudly, stepping into their little bubble of intimacy. "Hope I'm not interrupting anything important." They jumped apart like guilty teenagers, which would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. "Greg," Alicia said, her voice pitched too high, "we were just talking about work." "Work," I repeated slowly. "Right, must be some pretty intense workplace discussions. You both look a little flushed." Dominic straightened up, puffing out his chest like the overgrown peacock he was. "Is there a problem here, Greg?" "Problem?" I laughed, and several people nearby turned to look at us. "No problem at all. Just admiring your costume, Dom. Very authentic. Though I have to ask, did the loincloth come with instructions? Or did you figure out how to tie it all by yourself?" A few people snickered, and Dominic's face darkened. "Very funny." "I thought so," I said. "But then again, I've always had a good sense of humor. It's one of the things my wife used to love about me, back when she still noticed I existed." The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with Richard's plastic sword. Alicia was looking at me with a mixture of guilt and anger, while Dominic looked like he was trying to decide whether to hit me or just flex his muscles until I went away. "Greg," Alicia said quietly, "maybe we should talk about this at home." "Oh, we'll definitely be talking," I assured her. "But first, I want to enjoy the party. After all, Halloween only comes once a year. It would be a shame to waste it." I turned to Dominic, my smile widening. "Speaking of which, I hope you're planning to stick around for the whole evening. I have a feeling the night's going to be full of surprises." Something in my tone must have gotten through to him, because his eyes narrowed suspiciously. "What kind of surprises?" "The best kind," I said. "The kind you never see coming." And with that ominous promise hanging in the air, I walked away, leaving them to wonder exactly what I meant. Behind me, I could hear Alicia calling my name, but I didn't look back. The party was just getting started, and I had a show to put on. The thing about revenge is that it's a lot like cooking. Timing is everything. Too early, and the ingredients aren't ready. Too late, and the whole dish is ruined. As I watched the party continue around me, I knew my moment was coming soon. It started with a phone call. I was standing near the front window, pretending to admire Richard's Halloween decorations while actually keeping an eye on Alicia and Dominic when my phone buzzed. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer anyway. Greg Fisher? The voice was professional, clipped. Yeah, that's me. This is Janet Morrison from Channel 7 News. I'm calling about a viral video that was posted online about an hour ago. It involves your wife, and we'd like to get a statement. My blood went cold. What kind of video? It appears to show an incident on a commercial flight. There's been some bathroom-related chaos, and your wife is prominently featured. The video has already been shared over 50,000 times. I closed my eyes, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and dread. My little prank had worked faster than I'd expected. Mr. Fisher, are you there? Yeah, I'm here. What exactly happened? Well, according to the person who filmed it, your wife was on a business flight this afternoon when she apparently had a very public and very messy digestive emergency. The video shows her running down the aisle in obvious distress, and then, well, let's just say she didn't make it to the bathroom in time. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. The laxatives I'd mixed in with her special supplies had been industrial strength, designed to kick in about 6 hours after consumption. I'd calculated the timing perfectly. The incident caused the plane to make an emergency landing, the reporter continued. Several passengers required medical attention due to the aroma. Your wife was taken to a local hospital for evaluation. Is she okay? I asked, trying to sound concerned rather than gleeful. She was released about an hour ago, but Mr. Fisher, the video is everywhere. Social media, news websites, even some late-night talk shows are already making jokes about it. We're calling it the Mile High Mess. Perfect. I appreciate you calling, I said, but I don't have any comment at this time. I hung up and immediately pulled up social media on my phone. Sure enough, the video was the top trending topic. Thousands of comments, memes already being created, and my wife's face, red with embarrassment and something else, plastered across the internet for all to see. Greg! Alicia's voice behind me made me jump. I turned to find her standing there, still in her Catwoman costume, but now she looked pale and shaky. We need to talk. I bet we do, I said, pocketing my phone. Rough flight today? Her eyes widened. You know. The whole world knows, sweetheart. You're famous. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging in through my shirt. Please tell me you didn't what? I asked innocently. Didn't find your little care package, didn't figure out what you were planning to do with it, didn't decide to give you a taste of your own medicine? You fool, she hissed. Do you have any idea what you've done? My career is ruined. Your career? I laughed, loud enough that several people turned to look at us. What about our marriage? What about our kids? What about the fact that you've been planning to screw your coworker while I'm home watching Netflix and wondering why my wife doesn't love me anymore? Keep your voice down, she snapped, looking around nervously. Why? Afraid people might find out what kind of person you really are? I stepped closer, lowering my voice to a whisper. Too late for that, don't you think? Before she could respond, Dominic appeared at her side. He'd thrown a shirt on over his Tarzan costume, probably because he was starting to feel ridiculous. Good. Everything okay here? He asked, trying to sound casual but failing miserably. Everything's perfect, I said, just discussing my wife's newfound internet fame. You haven't seen the video yet, have you, Dom? It's quite something, really shows her natural side. His confusion was almost comical. What video? I pulled out my phone and found the clip, turning the screen toward him. His expression went from confusion to shock to barely contained laughter in about 3 seconds. Oh, crap, he said, then immediately looked guilty for finding it funny. My thoughts, exactly, I said, though I think the passengers on that flight probably used stronger language. Alicia looked like she was about to cry or hit someone, possibly both. You planned this, she said. You knew what I was going to do, and you sabotaged me. I prefer to think of it as creative problem solving, I replied. You had a problem, specifically how to cheat on your husband without getting caught. I solved it by making sure you got caught in a much more public and humiliating way. You're sick, Dominic said, finally finding his voice. This is your wife we're talking about. I turned to face him fully, and whatever he saw in my expression made him take a step back. You're right, I said quietly. She is my wife, the mother of my children, the woman I've loved for 15 years, And you were planning to screw her tomorrow night while my kids were at their grandmother's house?" The words hung in the air like a challenge. Around us, the party continued, but I could tell people were starting to notice the tension. "Good. Let them watch." "Greg," Alicia started, but I held up a hand. "No, let me finish," I said. "See, I thought about just confronting you two directly, having a nice civilized conversation about boundaries and respect and the sanctity of marriage. But then I realized something. You don't respect me enough for that to work. You see me as a joke. A boring husband who manages restaurants and watches too much TV and doesn't have the balls to stand up for himself." I smiled, and I could tell from their expressions that it wasn't a pleasant sight. "So I decided to show you what happens when the joke stops being funny." "What's that supposed to mean?" Dominic asked, but his voice was shaky now. "It means the night is young," I said, "and I'm just getting started." As if on cue, Susie came rushing over, her face flushed with booze and excitement. "Alicia," she called out. "Oh my God, I just saw the video. Are you okay? Everyone's talking about it." The look of horror on my wife's face was worth everything I'd been through in the past few weeks. She tried to play it off, but Susie was drunk and loud, and her voice carried across the room. "I can't believe you crap yourself on a plane," she continued, oblivious to the growing crowd of eavesdroppers. "The comments are hilarious. Someone called you the brown bomber, and there's already a meme with your face on it." "Susie, please," Alicia begged, but it was too late. The damage was done. People were pulling out their phones, searching for the video, sharing it with friends. Within minutes, half the party had seen my wife's most humiliating moment, and the whispers were starting. "I think I'm going to be sick," Alicia muttered. "Funny," I said. "That's exactly what the passengers on your flight said." She glared at me with pure hatred, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was seeing the real Alicia, not the fake, flirty version she'd been performing for everyone else. "This isn't over," she said. "You're absolutely right," I agreed. "It's not." And then, because I couldn't resist one final twist of the knife, I pulled up the video on my phone and handed it to the nearest group of partygoers. "Hey everyone," I called out. "Want to see something really funny? My wife's already gone viral tonight." The crowd gathered around my phone, and within seconds, the room was filled with shocked laughter and disgusted groans. Alicia pushed through the crowd, heading for the door with Dominic close behind her. But I wasn't done with them yet, not by a long shot. As they reached the front door, I raised my voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Leaving so soon?" I called out. "But the party's just getting started." Alicia turned back, tears streaming down her face, her Catwoman makeup smeared and running. "I hate you," she said. "I know," I replied. "But at least now we're even." She slammed the door behind her, and the room fell silent for a moment. Then Richard started clapping, slowly at first, then faster, and soon the whole room was applauding. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard announced, "I think we just witnessed the greatest Halloween prank in history." The crowd cheered, and people started coming over to pat me on the back and congratulate me on my creativity. But I barely heard them. I was already thinking about what came next. Because Alicia was right about one thing, this wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. Sunday morning came with the kind of hangover that makes you question every life choice you've ever made. But for once, it wasn't from booze. It was from the intoxicating rush of finally fighting back. I was sitting at my kitchen table, scrolling through the endless stream of comments and shares on Alicia's viral video, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my mother-in-law's number, and I briefly considered letting it go to voicemail. But curiosity won out. "Hello, Margaret." "Gregory." Her voice was ice cold, which was actually warmer than usual. "I assume you've seen the news about my daughter." "Hard to miss it," I said, taking a sip of coffee. "It's trending on 3 different platforms." "This is your doing, isn't it?" I had to admire her directness. Margaret had never liked me. Thought Alicia could have done better than a restaurant manager with a smart mouth and a tendency to speak his mind, but she wasn't stupid. "I have no idea what you're talking about," I said innocently. "Don't lie to me, Gregory. Alicia told me about your little confrontation at the party. She thinks you tampered with her medication." "Her medication?" I laughed. "Is that what she's calling it now?" There was a long pause. "What exactly are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything, Margaret. I'm stating facts. Your daughter was carrying around supplies for an extramarital affair, and I decided to give her a different kind of surprise. If she wants to call lube and Viagra medication, that's her choice." The silence on the other end was deafening. "You're a monster," she finally said. "Maybe," I agreed, "but I'm a monster who's been faithful to his wife for 15 years. Can she say the same?" She hung up on me, which I took as a victory. My phone immediately started ringing again, but this time it was a number I recognized. My lawyer, Patricia Santos. I'd called her yesterday after the party, figuring I was going to need legal advice sooner rather than later. "Greg, we need to talk," she said without preamble. "Alicia's filed for divorce, and she's requesting emergency custody of the kids." That sobered me up fast. "On what grounds?" "She's claiming you're mentally unstable and potentially dangerous. The video incident, the confrontation at the party, she's painting a picture of a man who's lost control." "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" Patricia's voice was sharp. "Greg, I've known you for 5 years, and I've never seen you act like this. What exactly happened at that party?" I told her everything. The affair, the supplies in Alicia's purse, my creative solution to the problem. When I finished, there was a long silence. "Jesus, Greg," she finally said. "You do realize that what you did could be considered attack, right? Tampering with someone's food or medication?" "It wasn't medication," I interrupted. "It was lube and boner pills. She was planning to cheat on me. That doesn't matter legally. If she can prove you deliberately caused her damage, then I'm screwed," I finished. "I get it. But Pat, I'm not backing down on this. She wants to play hardball? Fine, let's play. What does that mean?" I looked out my kitchen window at the house across the street, where Mrs. Chen was already setting up her elaborate Halloween decorations for next weekend. Normal people, living normal lives, dealing with normal problems. "It means I'm done being the nice guy," I said. "It means I'm done pretending that playing by the rules gets you anywhere when the other side is cheating." "Greg, listen to me very carefully," Patricia said. "Whatever you're thinking of doing, don't. Let me handle this legally. We can fight the custody motion. We can present evidence of her affair. Evidence that I obtained illegally by going through her purse," I pointed out. "We'll figure something out. But if you do anything else to escalate this situation, you're going to end up in jail, or worse." I promised her I'd be good, but we both knew I was lying. After I hung up, I spent the next hour doing research. Social media, local news sites, even some of the gossip blogs that had picked up Alicia's story. The consensus was pretty clear. My wife had become the internet's latest laughingstock, and the jokes weren't stopping anytime soon. But more importantly, I was learning things about her that I'd never known. Comments from coworkers, friends, even some of our neighbors, all painting a picture of a woman who'd been living a double life for months. "Always thought she was stuck up," one comment read. "This couldn't have happened to a more deserving person." "I work with her," said another. "Trust me, she's had this coming for a long time." It was like watching a dam break. All the people who'd been too polite to say anything before were suddenly sharing their real opinions, and none of them were flattering. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Dude, you need to see this." He'd sent me a link to a local Facebook group, one of those neighborhood gossip pages where people complained about barking dogs and suspicious strangers. Someone had posted a screenshot of Alicia's video along with the caption, "When you live in the same neighborhood as internet famous people." The comments were brutal. "Isn't that the woman who's always complaining about other people's kids? She tried to get my dog taken away last year because it barked too much. Karma's a witch. My daughter goes to school with her kids, always acting like she's better than everyone else. Not so high and mighty now." I was starting to feel almost sorry for her when my phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was local. "Mr. Fisher, this is Detective Morrison with the county police. We need to speak with you about an incident involving your wife." My stomach dropped. "What kind of incident?" "She's filed a complaint alleging that you deliberately poisoned her. We'd like you to come in for questioning." "Am I under arrest?" "Not at this time, but I'd strongly recommend you bring a lawyer." I called Patricia back, and an hour later we were sitting in a sterile interview room at the police station. Detective Morrison was a tired-looking woman in her 50s who seemed more annoyed than concerned about the whole situation. "Mr. Fisher," she began, "your wife alleges that you tampered with her personal items, causing her to become violently ill on a commercial aircraft. She's provided us with what she claims is evidence, remnants of some kind of powder that she says you substituted for her legitimate medication." "What kind of medication?" Patricia asked. The detective looked uncomfortable. "She claims it was digestive aids for a chronic condition. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. Alicia was trying to spin her affair supplies as medical necessities. "Detective," Patricia said, "do you have any actual evidence that my client tampered with anything? Any witnesses, fingerprints, video footage?" "Well, no, but then what we have is a woman who's embarrassed about a very public incident trying to blame her husband for her own poor choices." The detective looked at me. "Mr. Fisher, did you tamper with your wife's medication?" I met her eyes steadily. "Detective, I have no idea what my wife was taking or why. All I know is that she's been acting strangely for weeks, and now she's trying to blame me for her problems." It wasn't technically a lie. I really didn't know what she'd been planning to do with those supplies beyond the obvious. The interview lasted another 30 minutes, but it was clear the detective's heart wasn't in it. Without physical evidence or witnesses, there wasn't much of a case to build. As we were leaving, Patricia pulled me aside. "You dodged a bullet there," she said. "But, Greg, this is your warning. Whatever game you're playing, it ends now. Alicia's not going to give up, and next time you might not be so lucky." I nodded and promised to be careful, but my mind was already moving on to the next phase of my plan. Because Patricia was wrong about one thing. This wasn't a game. This was war, and I was just getting started. That evening, I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood, partly to clear my head, partly to see how the local rumor mill was processing the weekend's events. I didn't have to wait long to find out. "Greg," Mrs. Patterson called out from her front yard where she was raking leaves. "How are you holding up, honey?" Mrs. Patterson was the neighborhood gossip queen, a sweet old lady who knew everyone's business and wasn't shy about sharing it. "I'm managing," I said, stopping at her fence. "That poor woman," she said, shaking her head. "Though I have to say I'm not entirely surprised." "Really?" She leaned closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "I've seen that man coming and going from your house when you're at work. The muscular one with the fancy car. Always thought something wasn't quite right about that." My blood went cold. "What man?" "Oh, you know the one. Looks like he spends all his time at the gym. I assumed he was a friend of Alicia's from work, but..." She trailed off, looking embarrassed. "But what?" "Well, they always seemed very friendly. And he never stayed long, just an hour or two in the afternoon when the kids were at school." I felt something dark and violent stirring in my chest. "How long has this been going on?" "Oh, months now, since the summer at least. I probably should have said something, but I didn't want to cause trouble if it was innocent." Innocent, right. I thanked Mrs. Patterson and continued my walk, but my mind was racing. Dominic had been coming to my house, sleeping in my bed probably, while I was at work trying to support the family he was helping to destroy. By the time I got home, I had made a decision. Alicia wanted to play dirty? Fine. It was time to show her what dirty really looked like. Monday morning brought a new level of hell, courtesy of the internet's infinite capacity for cruelty. Alicia's video had spawned an entire ecosystem of memes, remixes, and parody accounts. Someone had even created a fake Twitter profile called The Mile High Mess that was posting hourly updates about bathroom emergencies around the world. I was scrolling through the latest batch of jokes while drinking my morning coffee when my phone rang. The caller ID showed the number for Alicia's airline. "Mr. Fisher, this is Janet Chen from Human Resources at SkyWest Airlines. I'm calling about your wife." "Let me guess," I said. "She's been suspended pending an investigation into her viral fame?" There was a pause. "Actually, yes. How did you know?" "Lucky guess. What exactly is she being investigated for?" "Well, the incident on Friday's flight caused significant disruption. The plane had to make an emergency landing, several passengers required medical attention, and the cleanup costs were substantial. We need to determine whether this was a genuine medical emergency or if there were other factors involved." Other factors. I like that euphemism. I see. And what does this mean for her employment? She's on unpaid leave until we complete our review. Given the public nature of the incident and the negative publicity it's generated for our company, I have to be honest. Her future with SkyWest is uncertain. After I hung up, I felt a brief moment of guilt. Alicia had worked for that airline for 8 years, and despite her recent moral failings, she'd been good at her job. But then I remembered Mrs. Patterson's revelation about Dominic's afternoon visits, and the guilt evaporated. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at Denny's on 5th Street at noon. Come alone, Subtle as always. But I was curious to see what she had to say, so I agreed. Denny's at noon on a Monday was exactly as depressing as you'd expect. A handful of retirees nursing coffee and pie, a few shift workers grabbing lunch before heading home, and the persistent smell of grease and disappointment. Alicia was waiting in a corner booth, wearing sunglasses despite being indoors, and looking like she hadn't slept in days. "You came," she said as I slid into the seat across from her. "You said it was important." She took off her sunglasses, and I could see she'd been crying. Her eyes were red and puffy, her makeup minimal and poorly applied. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Greg, we need to call a truce," she said. "This has gone too far." "Has it?" I signaled the waitress for coffee. "I don't think it's gone nearly far enough. I lost my job. I heard. Congratulations on achieving internet immortality." She flinched. "This isn't a joke. I have a family to support." "Funny," I said. "I seem to remember having a family to support too, right up until you decided to start screwing your coworker in our bed." Her face went pale. "How did you—" Mrs. Patterson is very observant, also very talkative. Apparently, Dominic's been a regular visitor to our house for months. Always when I'm at work, always when the kids are at school. Very considerate of you both. "Greg, please." "Please what?" I leaned forward. "Please forgive you? Please pretend this never happened? Please go back to being the oblivious husband while you and your boyfriend laugh about what a pathetic loser I am?" "It's not like that." "Then what is it like, Alicia? Enlighten me." She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she finally looked up, there was something different in her eyes. Not guilt or shame, but calculation. "I want a divorce," she said. "But I want it to be amicable, for the kids' sake." "Amicable," I repeated. That's an interesting word choice. "I'm willing to split everything 50-50. The house, the savings, even my retirement account. All I ask is that you stop this campaign of maltreatment." "Maltreatment?" I laughed. "Is that what we're calling it now? You ruined my reputation, cost me my job, and turned me into a laughingstock. What would you call it?" "Justice," I said simply. The waitress came over with my coffee, and we sat in silence until she left. "There's something else," Alicia said finally. "Something you should know before you decide how far you want to push this." "I'm listening." She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope, sliding it across the table. "Open it." Inside were photographs, dozens of them, all showing me at various restaurants and bars around town. But these weren't casual shots. Someone had been following me, documenting my movements, capturing me in moments when I thought I was alone. "What the hell is this?" "Insurance," she said. "Dominic's been watching you for weeks. We know about your little cash skimming operation at the restaurants." My blood went cold. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really? Because we have photos of you taking money from the registers, pocketing cash from customer payments, even skimming from the employee tip jars. Dominic used to work security before he got the airline job. He knows how to document evidence." I stared at the photos, my mind racing. Yes, I'd been taking money from the restaurants. Small amounts, nothing that would bankrupt the company, just enough to supplement our income when things got tight. It was wrong, but it wasn't exactly the crime of the century. "How much?" I asked. "We estimate about $15,000 over the past year. That's felony theft, Greg. Prison time?" "You're bluffing." She smiled, and for the first time since I'd known her, it was genuinely cold. "Try me." We stared at each other across the table, and I realized I'd underestimated her. This wasn't the guilt-ridden wife begging for forgiveness. This was a woman who'd been planning her exit strategy for months, gathering ammunition for exactly this moment. "So, what do you want?" I asked. "I want you to back off. No more pranks, no more public humiliation, no more games. In return, these photos disappear, and we handle the divorce like civilized adults. And if I don't agree, then I turn this evidence over to the police and your employers. You'll lose your job, probably go to jail, and definitely lose any chance of getting custody of the kids." I had to admire her thoroughness. She'd found my weakness and exploited it perfectly. "I need time to think about it," I said. "You have until tomorrow night. After that, all bets are off." She stood up, putting her sunglasses back on. "Oh, and Greg, that little stunt you pulled at the party? Dominic's not the forgiving type. I'd watch my back if I were you." She left me sitting there with the photos and a cold cup of coffee. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I felt like I might be in over my head. But as I drove home, my initial panic began to transform into something else. A cold, calculating anger that made my earlier pranks look like child's play. Alicia thought she held all the cards. She thought she could blackmail me into submission and walk away from this mess with her dignity intact. She was wrong. Dead wrong. And I was about to prove it. That evening, I made a series of phone calls. The first was to Patricia, my lawyer, who listened to my description of Alicia's blackmail attempt with growing alarm. Greg, if they have evidence of theft, you need to take this seriously. Even if the amounts are small, your employers could press charges and— What if the evidence was obtained illegally? I interrupted. What do you mean? I mean, if Dominic was stalking me, following me around, taking pictures without my knowledge, isn't that maltreatment, invasion of privacy? There was a pause. Possibly, but it would depend on whether he was on public property, whether you had a reasonable expectation of privacy. It's complicated, but it's something we could use? Maybe. But Greg, I have to ask, did you actually take money from the restaurants? I sighed. Yeah, I did. Not a lot and not often, but yeah. Then regardless of how they obtained the evidence, you're still guilty of theft. My advice is to take their deal. My second call was to Richard. Jesus, Greg, he said after I explained the situation. You really stepped in it this time. I know, but I'm not giving up. There has to be something I can use against them. Like what? I don't know yet, but Richard, I need you to do me a favor. Can you get me the security footage from your Halloween party? Why? Because I want to see exactly what Alicia and Dominic were doing when they thought no one was watching. My third call was to a private investigator I'd found online, a guy named Mike Torres who specialized in infidelity cases and had excellent reviews. Mr. Fisher, he said after I'd explained what I needed, I have to tell you, this kind of thing can get expensive fast. How expensive? Depends on what you want me to find. Basic surveillance, maybe $1,000. Deep background checks, financial records, communications monitoring that could run you $5,000 to $10,000, and there's no guarantee I'll find anything useful. Do it, I said. All of it. You sure? Because once we start down this road, there's no going back. If your wife really does have evidence of your theft, she does. But Mike, I'm betting she's got secrets of her own. Everyone does. I just need to find them before she destroys my life. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and stared at the photos Alicia had shown me. She was right about one thing. I was guilty of theft, and if she turned me in, I'd probably go to jail. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd assumed I cared more about my freedom than I did about revenge. She was about to learn how wrong she was. Tuesday morning brought the kind of breakthrough that makes you believe in karma. Mike Torres called at 7 a.m., his voice crackling with excitement. Greg, you're not going to believe what I found. I was barely awake, but his tone snapped me to attention. What is it? Your wife and her boyfriend aren't just having an affair. They've been running a scam on the airline's insurance company. Fake injury claims, fraudulent medical reports, the works. We're talking about serious federal crimes here. I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. Tell me everything. Dominic's been filing bogus workers' compensation claims for months. Fake back injuries, repetitive stress disorders, even a claim about chemical sensitivity from cleaning supplies. Each claim is worth thousands in medical coverage and paid leave. And Alicia's involved how? She's been rubber stamping the claims through HR, making sure they get approved without proper investigation. In return, Dominic's been splitting the insurance payouts with her. I've got bank records showing regular cash deposits into both their accounts that correspond exactly with the dates of the fraudulent claims. I felt a grin spreading across my face. How much are we talking about? Conservative estimate, about $60,000 over the past 18 months. And Greg, this isn't just theft, it's wire fraud, insurance fraud, conspiracy, racketeering. We're talking federal prison time. Please tell me you have proof. Documents, bank records, even recorded phone calls between them discussing the scheme. Your wife's not as smart as she thinks she is. She used her work phone for a lot of these conversations, and the airline records everything. I felt like I just won the lottery. Mike, you beautiful fool, I could kiss you. Save it for your wife when you show her these files. Speaking of which, what's your plan? That was the million-dollar question. I had enough evidence to destroy both Alicia and Dominic, but I needed to be smart about how I used it. Give me a few hours to think about it, I said. But Mike, I want you to make copies of everything. Multiple copies. And I want them stored somewhere safe. Already done. Greg, be careful with this. These people have already shown they're willing to play dirty, and now they've got a lot more to lose. After I hung up, I spent the next hour poring over the files Mike had sent me. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank statements, medical records, recorded conversations, even emails between Alicia and Dominic discussing their scheme. But the most damning piece of evidence was a recorded phone call from just 2 weeks ago, where they discussed their plan to frame me for theft and use the divorce to cover their tracks. Once Greg's out of the picture, Alicia's voice said through my phone speaker, we can clean up our finances and start fresh somewhere else. What about the insurance investigation? Dominic's voice replied. If they start looking too closely, they won't. I've got friends in the investigative department. As long as we keep our heads down and don't get greedy, we're golden. And if Greg causes problems? He won't. Trust me. I know how to handle my husband. A few threats, a little blackmail, and he'll roll over like he always does. Listening to my wife dismiss me so casually was like being punched in the gut, but it also crystallized my resolve. She thought I was weak, predictable, easily controlled. Time to prove her wrong. I called Patricia first. Greg, please tell me you haven't done anything stupid, she said by way of greeting. Actually, I've done something brilliant. How would you like to turn the tables on Alicia's blackmail scheme? I spent the next 30 minutes walking her through Mike's discoveries. By the end, she was practically cackling with delight. This is incredible, she said. Not only do we have a defense against her theft allegations, we've got grounds for a countersuit. Fraud, conspiracy, racketeering. We could take her for everything she's worth. What about my theft charges? What theft charges? Greg, compared to what they've been doing, your little cash skimming looks like finding pennies in a couch cushion. Any prosecutor who sees this evidence is going to be far more interested in the federal crimes than your petty theft. My next call was to Detective Morrison. Mr. Fisher, she said, sounding tired, please tell me you're not calling to confess to poisoning your wife? Actually, I'm calling to report a crime. Several crimes, actually. Insurance fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, and racketeering. There was a long pause. I'm listening. I gave her the abbreviated version, focusing on the evidence Mike had uncovered. By the end of the conversation, she was asking me to come in immediately with all the documentation. Mr. Fisher, she said, if this evidence is legitimate, we're talking about federal charges. I'll need to contact the FBI. Do what you need to do, Detective. I just want justice. But before I turned everything over to the authorities, I had one more call to make. I dialed Alicia's number, and she answered on the second ring. Greg, I told you I needed an answer by tonight. I've got an answer for you, I said, but I think we should meet in person. How about the same Denny's, same time? Fine, but this better not be some kind of game. Oh, it's definitely a game, I said, but I don't think you're going to like the rules. At noon, I walked into Denny's carrying a briefcase full of evidence that would destroy my wife's life. She was waiting in the same corner booth, looking more confident than she had the day before. Well, she said as I sat down, what's it going to be? Instead of answering, I opened my briefcase and pulled out a thick folder, sliding it across the table. What's this? She asked. Your get-out-of-jail-free card, or rather, your complete lack thereof. She opened the folder, and I watched her face go pale as she recognized the bank statements and medical records. Where did you get these? Does it matter? The question is, what are you going to do now that I have them? She was flipping through the pages frantically, her hands shaking. This is federal fraud? Insurance scam? Conspiracy to commit racketeering? Yeah, I know. Turns out you and Dominic have been busy little bees. You can't prove anything, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I pulled out my phone and played the recorded conversation where they discussed framing me. Her face went from pale to gray. Still think I can't prove anything? She closed the folder and stared at me across the table. What do you want? I want you to listen very carefully to what's going to happen next, I said. In about an hour, I'm going to walk into the FBI field office and turn over all of this evidence. By tonight, you and Dominic will be under federal investigation. By next week, you'll probably be under arrest. Greg, please. I'm not finished. You thought you could blackmail me with evidence of petty theft? Congratulations. You just played your hand against someone holding a royal flush. Your little theft allegations are going to look like jaywalking compared to what you've been doing. Tears were streaming down her face now, but I felt no sympathy. There's only one way this doesn't happen, I continued. You're going to call off your divorce attorney. You're going to admit to your affair publicly. You're going to sign over full custody of the kids to me, and you're going to disappear from our lives forever. I can't do that. Then enjoy federal prison. I hear the orange jumpsuits will clash terribly with your complexion. I stood up, closing my briefcase. You have 2 hours to decide. After that, the choice is out of your hands. As I walked toward the door, she called after me. Greg, wait. I turned back. The kids, she said desperately. They need their mother. They need a mother, I corrected. They don't need a criminal who was willing to frame their father to cover up her own crimes. I never meant for it to go this far, but it did. And now you have to live with the consequences. I left her sitting there with the evidence of her crimes spread across the table. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like myself again. Not the weak, predictable husband she thought she could manipulate, but the man who'd just checkmated her in a game she didn't even know she was playing. 2 hours later, my phone rang. Greg, Alicia's voice was barely a whisper. I'll do whatever you want. Just please don't turn us in. Too late, I said. I already did. The silence on the other end was deafening. But, Alicia, I added, I did put in a good word for you with the FBI. Told them you might be willing to cooperate in their investigation of Dominic. You fool? Maybe. But I'm a fool who's about to get full custody of his kids and watch his cheating wife go to federal prison. I can live with that. I hung up and poured myself a drink. The game was almost over. The FBI moved faster than I'd expected. By Thursday morning, both Alicia and Dominic were in custody, and by Thursday afternoon, their arrest photos were plastered across every local news website and social media platform. The irony wasn't lost on me. Less than a week after Alicia's bathroom disaster had made her internet famous, she was back in the headlines for an entirely different reason. Local airline employees arrested in federal fraud scheme, read the headline in the morning paper. Below it was a photo of Alicia in handcuffs, looking nothing like the confident Catwoman who'd flirted with her lover at Richard's party. My phone had been ringing nonstop since the news broke. Reporters, neighbors, friends, even some of my restaurant employees. Everyone wanted to know what I thought about my wife's arrest. I'd prepared a simple statement. I'm shocked and disappointed by these allegations. My primary concern right now is protecting my children from the fallout of their mother's poor choices. It was diplomatic, measured, and completely dishonest. The truth was, I was damn ecstatic. But the best part wasn't the arrests or the media coverage or even the inevitable collapse of Alicia's reputation. The best part was the phone call I received Friday afternoon from Agent Sarah Martinez of the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division. Mr. Fisher, I wanted to thank you personally for bringing this case to our attention. The evidence you provided was instrumental in building our case. Just doing my civic duty, I said. There's something else. During our investigation, we discovered that your wife and Mr. Martinez were planning to frame you for embezzlement from your restaurants. They'd already planted false evidence and were preparing to file charges against you next week. I felt a chill run down my spine. What kind of evidence? Forged documents showing inflated cash deposits, altered security footage, even a fake confession letter written in your handwriting. If they'd gone through with their plan, you'd probably be in jail right now instead of them. Jesus. The good news is that we've recovered all of the planted evidence, and we can prove it was fabricated. You're completely in the clear, both for their false allegations and for the minor cash discrepancies they were planning to exaggerate. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and tried to process what I'd just learned. Alicia hadn't just been planning to divorce me. She'd been planning to destroy me completely, to frame me for crimes I didn't commit and steal my children while I rotted in prison. The woman I'd loved for 15 years, the mother of my children, had been willing to ruin my life to cover up her own crimes. I should have felt hurt, betrayed, devastated. Instead, I felt vindicated. That evening, I decided to take a walk through the neighborhood. It was Halloween night, exactly 1 week since the party that had started this whole mess, and kids were out trick-or-treating in costumes that ranged from adorable to terrifying. I was passing Mrs. Patterson's house when she called out to me from her front porch. "Greg, how are you holding up, dear?" "I'm doing better than expected," I said, stopping at her fence. "I saw the news about Alicia. I just can't believe it. All that time I thought she was just having an affair, and it turns out she was running some kind of criminal enterprise." Life's full of surprises, I said. Those poor children, how are they handling all this? They're resilient, and they're better off without her influence. Mrs. Patterson nodded sagely. Sometimes the best thing a parent can do is remove themselves from their children's lives. Better no mother than a criminal mother. As I continued my walk, I reflected on how much had changed in just 1 week. 7 days ago, I'd been a betrayed husband, too weak and pathetic to stand up for himself. Tonight, I was a single father with full custody of his kids and a front-row seat to his ex-wife's spectacular downfall. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Dude, you need to see this." He'd sent me a link to a local news story about Alicia and Dominic's case. But this wasn't just a dry recitation of the charges. It was an in-depth investigation that had uncovered even more dirt. Apparently, their insurance scam was just the tip of the iceberg. The FBI had discovered evidence of identity theft, tax fraud, and even a scheme to steal money from the airline's employee pension fund. But the best part was at the end of the article, where they'd included quotes from former coworkers and neighbors. "I always knew something was off about her," said one anonymous airline employee. "She acted like she was better than everyone else, but she was always asking personal questions about people's finances and medical issues. She tried to get my family evicted from our apartment," said a former neighbor. "Filed false complaints with the landlord, called the police with noise violations that never happened. She was vindictive and cruel. The whole neighborhood is celebrating," said another neighbor who requested anonymity. "She made everyone's lives miserable with her constant complaints and petty power trips. It's poetic justice that she's finally getting what she deserves." I was scrolling through the comments section when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer. "Is this Greg Fisher?" The voice was young, female, nervous. "Yeah, who's this?" "My name is Jessica Torres. I'm a reporter with Channel 7 News. I'm working on a follow-up story about your wife's case, and I was wondering if you'd be willing to do an interview." "What kind of interview?" "Well, you've become something of a local folk hero, the husband who uncovered his wife's criminal conspiracy and brought her to justice. People are calling you a real-life superhero." I had to laugh at that. "I'm no superhero. I'm just a guy who got tired of being screwed over." That's exactly the angle we want to explore. The ordinary man who fought back against corruption and won. Would you consider going on camera? I thought about it for a moment. Part of me wanted to stay out of the spotlight, to let Alicia's downfall speak for itself. But another part of me, the part that had been humiliated and betrayed and nearly framed for crimes I didn't commit, wanted the whole world to know the truth. "When and where?" I asked. The interview was scheduled for Monday morning at the Channel 7 studio. But before then, I had one more piece of business to take care of. Saturday afternoon, I drove to the county jail where Alicia was being held pending trial. She'd been denied bail. Apparently, federal fraud charges combined with evidence of flight risk didn't inspire confidence in the judicial system. The visiting room was exactly as depressing as you'd expect. Fluorescent lights, plastic chairs, bulletproof glass separating the inmates from their visitors. When Alicia appeared on the other side of the glass, I barely recognized her. Gone was the confident, flirtatious woman who'd worn a Catwoman costume and planned to cheat on her husband. In her place was a broken, hollow-eyed stranger in an orange jumpsuit. She picked up the phone on her side of the glass, and I did the same. "Craig," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't think you'd come." I almost didn't. "The kids are fine. They're staying with my parents until this all gets sorted out." She started crying then, ugly, desperate sobs that made her whole body shake. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." "Yes, you did," I said calmly. "You meant for all of it to happen. You just didn't mean to get caught. Please, Greg, I know I screwed up, but I'm still the mother of your children. They need me. They need stability. They need honesty. They need a parent who won't steal from insurance companies or frame innocent people for crimes they didn't commit. I can change. I can be better." I looked at her through the glass, really looked at her, and tried to find some trace of the woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. But she was gone, if she'd ever really existed at all. "No," I said finally. "You can't." I hung up the phone and walked away, leaving her crying alone behind the glass. On Monday morning, I sat in the Channel 7 studio and told my story to an audience of thousands. I talked about the Halloween party, The affair, the blackmail attempt, and the federal investigation that had brought it all crashing down. What would you say to other people who find themselves in similar situations? Jessica Torres asked. I'd say that sometimes the best thing you can do is stop being the sufferer and start being the hero of your own story, I replied. Don't let people walk all over you just because you love them, and don't be afraid to fight back when someone tries to destroy your life. Any regrets about how things turned out? I thought about it for a moment. Just one, I said. I regret that it took me so long to see who my wife really was, but I don't regret stopping her before she could hurt anyone else. The interview aired that evening, and by Tuesday morning, I was getting calls from book publishers, movie producers, and talk show hosts. Apparently, my story had struck a nerve with people who'd been betrayed by the people they trusted most, but I turned them all down. I didn't want fame or fortune or 15 minutes of celebrity. I just wanted my life back. 3 months later, I was sitting in my kitchen reading the morning paper when I came across a small item buried in the local news section. Local woman sentenced in federal fraud case. The article was brief, just a few paragraphs about how Alicia Fisher had been sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for her role in a multi-million-dollar insurance fraud scheme. Her co-conspirator, Dominic Martinez, had received 10 years. I folded the paper and looked out the window at my backyard where my kids were playing on the swing set I'd installed the week before. They were laughing and happy, and for the first time in months, so was I. My phone rang, and I saw Richard's name on the caller ID. Hey, man, he said. Did you see the news about Alicia's sentencing? Yeah, I saw it. 8 years. That's a long time. Not long enough, I said. And I meant it. So what's next for you? I watched my kids playing in the sunshine, listened to their laughter, and thought about all the possibilities that lay ahead. Next, I'm going to be the best father I can be, I said. And maybe, eventually, I'll find someone who actually deserves to be part of our family. You think you'll ever be able to trust someone again? Maybe. But if I do, it'll be someone who understands that trust is earned, not given, and someone who knows that if they betray that trust, they'll have to deal with the consequences. After I hung up, I went outside to join my kids. They ran to me, wrapping their arms around my legs and chattering excitedly about their games. Daddy, my daughter asked, are you happy now? I picked her up and spun her around, listening to her delighted squeals. Yeah, sweetheart, I said. I'm happy now. And for the first time in years, that was completely true. Looking back, I suppose some people might say I went too far, that I should have just divorced Alicia quietly and moved on with my life. That revenge is never the answer. But those people have never been betrayed by someone they loved completely. They've never discovered that their entire marriage was a lie, that their spouse was willing to destroy them to cover up their own crimes. Sometimes, revenge isn't about hurting someone else. Sometimes it's about refusing to be a sufferer. It's about standing up and fighting back when the world tries to knock you down. And sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys actually win. Alicia thought she was so clever, so much smarter than her boring, predictable husband. She thought she could manipulate me, blackmail me, and frame me for her crimes. She was wrong about everything. Except for one thing. I really was predictable. I was predictably loyal to the people I loved, predictably honest in my dealings with others, and predictably determined to protect my family from anyone who tried to hurt them, including their own mother. The last I heard, Alicia was serving her sentence at a federal women's prison in Pennsylvania. Word through the grapevine is that she's not adapting well to prison life. Apparently, her fellow inmates don't appreciate her superior attitude any more than her former neighbors did. Dominic, meanwhile, is doing his time at a federal facility in Texas. I'm told he's lost most of his muscle mass and spends his days working in the prison laundry. A far cry from his Tarzan costume and gym-sculpted physique. As for me, I'm doing better than I ever imagined possible. The kids are thriving, my restaurants are more profitable than ever, and I've even started dating again. A wonderful woman named Sarah who teaches 3rd grade and has never committed a federal crime in her life. We're taking things slow, but she understands my situation and doesn't pressure me for more than I'm ready to give. She's kind, honest, and completely transparent about her past and her intentions. In other words, she's everything Alicia pretended to be, but never was. Sometimes, late at night when the kids are asleep, I think about that Halloween party and everything that followed. I think about the man I was before, weak, naive, willing to accept whatever scraps of affection my wife threw my way. That man is gone, and I don't miss him. In his place is someone stronger, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous to anyone who might try to take advantage of his kindness. I learned something important through all of this. There's a difference between being a good person and being a pushover. You can be kind, generous, and loving without being weak. You can forgive mistakes without enabling misuse. And you can choose mercy without sacrificing justice. But most importantly, I learned that sometimes the best costume you can wear is your true self, even if that self is capable of things you never thought possible, especially then. My children will grow up knowing that their father fought for them, that he refused to let criminals destroy their family, and that he never backed down when it mattered most. They'll know that good people sometimes have to do hard things to protect the people they love. And they'll know that no matter what happens in their lives, their father will always be there to fight for them, even if it means going to war with the people who should have loved them most. That's a lesson worth learning, and it's a story worth telling.